Lando, the gap to Hamilton was 4.8. I think that's a podium, mate. I think that's a podium.
Yeah, boy! Well, that was a lot of fun. After, 7 whole months away, Formula 1 returned in dramatic fashion with the Austrian and Styrian Grand Prix. And to be fair, we received an absolute treat. We had a crazy race on week 1, a brilliant wet weather qualifying in week 2, a surprise podium, Haas being Haas. In brief, there was lots to talk about, so in this video I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown of the events of both races in a 100% serious and focused way. No new fans allowed here, boys. Let's get into this. Coming into the first weekend of the Austrian Grand Prix, one thing became evidently clear. Ferrari were well off the pace. So bad, in fact, was the pace of their car that Sebastian Vettel got knocked out at the end of Q2, and both cars were consistently losing up to 7/10 of a second down the straight. Almost like they're missing something from their engine. However, it wasn't all plain sailing for Mercedes either. Although Valtteri Bottas claimed pole position, his spontaneous decision to start a lawn mowing business ultimately brought out the yellow flags, something his teammate Lewis Hamilton claimed he couldn't see. Red Bull, clearly sensing blood in the water, decided to go full Karen mode after the qualifying session and protest the final order of the results. After some extensive technical analysis by, Karun Chandhok of all people, the stewards sided with Red Bull and slapped Hamilton with a 3-place grid penalty, which in turn promoted, Old Nozzer up into 3rd place on the grid, and with that the stage was set for Formula 1 racing to return once again. What could possibly go wrong? The 2020 Austrian Grand Prix was one of the most chaotic and maddening within recent memory. In all, 9 cars out of the 20 that started actually finished the race, which somehow meant that Nicholas Latifi, the rookie, in a Williams, finished P11, only 1 place outside the points, on his debut race. To be fair to Williams, they had a pretty good weekend on the whole. I mean, well, Latifi did kind of bin it into the wall in free practice 3, and George Russell's engine decided to die during the race, but hey, it's still progress. I wonder if they can keep this up. However, one team that didn't have such a good weekend was Red Bull. After an average start, Max Verstappen began chasing down Valtteri Bottas for the lead of the race. In order to start chasing down the faster Mercedes, the Red Bull engineers told Max Verstappen to kick in VTEC. VTEC then kicked off and started throwing things around the engine bay, and Verstappen had to retire with engine problems. Things didn't work out quite so well for his teammate Alex Albon either. On a late charge through the field, Alex Albon managed to make a fantastic move around the outside of Lewis Hamilton. But if you've seen Brazil 2019, you already know how that ended.
You've been struck by
Lewis Hamilton.
The stewards, once again not particularly impressed with Lewis Hamilton's race conduct, looked at this incident and awarded him a 5-second time penalty for his troubles. All this meant that, Old Nozzer was in with a shot of a podium, providing that he could close the gap to Hamilton on the last lap. So Lando stuck on that Eurobeat and did just that. To be fair, Norris becoming the 3rd youngest podium sitter in Formula 1 history was just one of many weird things that happened this race. In fact, too many to cover in detail in this video, so let's just give you a very brief rundown of some of them. Haas brought a neat little innovation to their car for the Austrian Grand Prix. Knowing that their car was a little bit slow and off the pace, they took off the one thing that makes their car slow on purpose: the brakes. The wheel of Kimi Raikkonen's Alfa Romeo decided it had had enough with being with a boring team like Alfa Romeo and decided to go and watch the race from the grandstands. After such a terrible qualifying, Ferrari had a bit of a resurgence during the race. Well, one half of it did, whilst Charles Leclerc somehow managed to drag that SF1000 to P2 on the grid. Poor old Sebastian Vettel made a silly move up the inside of the man that's replacing him at Ferrari, Carlos Sainz. And when Sebastian Vettel does that, we all know what happens next. There were other retirements, of course. Kvyat's suspension failed, and and Bottas got the win, I think. All in all, a good race. 8 out of 10. But how would the drivers cope in round 2 when the Formula 1 circus headed to Austria? Oh no, wait, we've had that one. One second, guys, one sec. Styria!
When I race, they take my time. Otherwise, I take my time.
A couple of weeks ago, I made a video about the teams in Formula 1 and how each of them had a sort of personality. It was all meant to be tongue-in-cheek and in good humour, but over the past couple of weeks, all of my predictions have been proved exactly right. Like over the course of the Austrian Grand Prix weekend, Red Bull were arrogant and protested the Mercedes DAS system, which didn't go well. Mercedes were utterly dominant, bar a few gearbox gripes. Alpha were just... and Haas were just... well, they were just doing their own thing really, weren't they? However, Taylor Swift wannabes Renault were the ones that proved me exactly right the most. It all started off in midweek when Renault decided to get back with their toxic ex. For the 3rd time! Outgoing driver Daniel Ricciardo then put the car in a wall at extremely high speeds, leaving the Australian with what can only be described as a very heavy limp to get back to the paddock with. During the race, Esteban Ocon's car went all French on us and decided to cook itself, which is fun. And when the Racing Points royally rinsed the Renaults in the race, yes! So much alliteration! Good old Cyril got all salty, so he sat down on his leather chaise longue, picked up a dart, and threw it at a picture of the Racing Point car. When it landed on the brake ducts, Cyril sat back on his chair and said,
"They are illegal."
After a disastrous opening race, Ferrari were also trying to make up for lost time as well. In order to do this, they brought forward a range of updates that were initially supposed to come in Hungary, including a new front wing and a new floor. However, the car still seemed far too draggy, and with Free Practice 3 being rained off, they didn't really have a handle on whether the upgrades actually worked or not. Needing a quick fix to this problem, Charles Leclerc had a fantastic idea. Thinking on his feet, he threw it down the inside of Sebastian Vettel into turn 3, taking off the German's rear wing and thus getting rid of the drag penalty they had before. And taking them out of the race, admittedly, but, you know, it's an idea. With all these shenanigans going on behind them, the road really was clear for Red Bull and Mercedes to have a proper ding-dong battle. And to be fair, a wet qualifying session showed us exactly that, with two of the greatest wet weather drivers in Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen going head-to-head to see who could set the fastest time. In the end, Lewis bounced back from his poor weekend in the first round and put in what Paul di Resta described as one of the greatest wet weather laps of all time. Max Verstappen wasn't a million miles away on his flying lap either, but then...
You can see the slightly damper track, just enough to loosen off the heavily loaded.
The wet conditions also allowed George Russell in a Williams to get out of Q1. Even Lando Norris was going great guns, qualifying in 6th, but was then hit with a 3-place grid penalty for overtaking in free practice? Safe to say the qualifying session was much more interesting than the actual race itself. I mean, the race wasn't bad or anything, it was a pretty good race all in all. Perez in the pink Mercedes fought his way through the field valiantly until he hit the back of Alex Albon and gave him flashbacks. This left Perez with a broken front wing with only a few laps to go. And when there's suddenly last lap points on offer, only one man is for the job. But that was pretty much it in terms of major race incidents, although I've probably missed something. In the end, Lewis Hamilton won in dominant fashion, taking his first win of the season.
I wonder if he can keep this up.
Safe to say at this stage that Merc are really looking like favourites for the Constructors' Championship. But with plenty of rounds still to go, the F1 circus went off to Hungary. Would Red Bull be able to get their act together? Would Ferrari stop being a bunch of clowns with the development of their car? Would Haas actually score some points? Well, I know the answer because this video took so long to make that it's actually been the Hungarian Grand Prix now, but spoilers. Nevertheless, stay tuned for the next totally serious race review, whenever that comes out. Be sure to like this video and share it around to shamelessly increase my Twitter clout, and I shall see you in the next one. Cheerio!